Okay, so next thing is HTTP verbs, right? So this is interesting because HTTP provides, some verbs or methods, right, to do a CRUD operation, right? So what is a CRUD operation? It's create, read, update, and delete. Okay, so suppose in your application, no, you want to create a very basic page where user can create data, right? So or submit information, and you want to provide the users to do some operations like once submitting, after submission is successful, right? So you want to provide them options like they can update the details, they can read the details, or they can delete the details. Okay, so get, post, put, delete. This is the four major things HTTP verbs we will be using it. And head is there. Head will only return a status code and a header. I'll explain what is a status code and what is a header in the upcoming slides. But let's understand first these four basic HTTP verbs. Okay, so I'll start with post, right? So because without the data available, you for doing it, you will not get anything, right? So assume that in your application it's just a profile creation application. So once you create, only you can view the profile, right? So post will help you to create data in server, right? So but is only post request is sufficient? No, it is not, because when the server gets a post request, right? So server should know what to do. So HTTP provides all these methods or guidelines like, okay, post should do create, right? We will send the data also in the message, but how we'll send the data I will show you, because in the post you send the data in the as a payload, as a body, right? So in the browser URL you will not be seeing the payload because that is a secure information. So let's assume that you have username, password, okay, you are creating, and maybe your billing address or your phone number, 4 fields, right? And you are sending a post request. Let me go to the notepad. So just construct a dummy payload. Okay, you have name and you, okay, and this is a, again, this is a JSON structure. I will, this is like simple key value pair structure. Yeah, we will learn more about it in the coming sections. For time being, just assume that this is a plain JSON file having keys and values. Okay, so name and address, it's a Bangalore, and you have maybe phone number. Okay, like 98 something, right? So I want to create this record in my server. Okay, the first step should be I should have a HTTP supporting method where I can send this particular details to the server, right? So you might be having one, your client application, right? Application, right? So client application will send a request, right? The request will be having this payload, right? Now, what are the information I'll be sending? Like, okay, hey, this is my information. This is in, JSON format. This is the content type, and I want to save it. So, payload and request HTTP verb will be post. Okay. Now, as soon as this request reach the server, right? So this is an API, this is a web API. So what server needs to do? Basically, server needs to process this request, right? So server has to know what to do with this request, right? Because server, until and unless you implement the logic, to what to do, because you can do anything with this request, right? So it's not necessarily you are going to save it, you can do anything. But since this is a post request and you specifically told the server, this is a post request, that means you want to create this record in the server. So our server, right, has to create it, right? Create this record. So server should have a database, right? If you want to create and save that record, server should have a database, right? And the database, you should have a table for users, right? Now the table should have fields, right? Table fields or columns, basically fields or columns. You should have those, basically these 3 columns you should have, right? Name, phone, and your address. But you can have other columns also, like ID, right? So because you want to identify, right? Suppose somebody has created, Manju has created this request first, then maybe Sai will be creating, then Dimpy will be creating. So how server will identify uniqueness of these records, right? So they may need a unique primary key. For example, now just consider like ID field is a primary key for that, and server will give a unique ID each time a new record has been created. Okay, now this is the logic server will use, like, okay, as soon as the request come for post, it will create a record in the database. Okay, and if suppose everything is fine, right, so there is no problem, internet is fine, and server is able to process the request and it has been created. Now server has to tell the client, okay, I got your request, it has been processed, I have created a record, and this is the details, right? So server has to send a message back to the client, right? Otherwise client will not know what happened to that request, right? So how the client will know or verify that this request has been created? One option is like you can directly connect to the DB, okay, and check in that corresponding database or in that corresponding table, I have a record added, right? That is a straightforward way. Or you can say that is a developer way of checking, right? So, but to an user, are we going to give access to the database directly? So what are the pros and cons you can see, right? So a lot of problem may happen, right? So they can manipulate, they can delete data, update data directly, right? So until and unless it is a testing DB, so we are not going to give direct access of our database to the client applications, right? So then how client application will verify that? Using another API. Okay, so this is post, right? You can create multiple records. Okay, it's entirely depend on how you implement. Suppose you want to restrict duplicate records, for example, right? Have to restrict in the database level or in your business logic. Because see, suppose you have added the same data, Manju, Bangalore, 783, exact same data, right? So the server may not know whether to keep it or throw it away. So basically, what server can actually do, if you are giving a constraint in the database, okay, like the exact duplicate phone number, it will not allow. Name it may allow, because multiple person may have name Manju, right? That's where the primary keys and the constraints come into picture in the database. So you can give a business logic, like if a person's phone number is same, it will not allow to save it. That happens when you when you create your profiles also, right? So suppose same username you are giving, then it will tell username already has been taken, right?
Yes.
In the Facebook and all, if you create profile, so mostly it will tell, okay, this username Manju username is already been taken, just give Manju 1 2 3 4, or it will suggest, right? That all depends on how you handle your business logic. Okay.
Yeah.
The server doesn't know anything about it. It's up to your implementation. And this is an important check for your testing. Okay, what kind of error message it is returning, right? So if you are trying to put some duplicate record. Okay. So next thing is get. So I want to verify, no, my record has been successfully updated, right? So maybe my URI will be like, my domain, then users, and then a specific ID. So suppose it is giving an ID 1 2 3 4. Okay. So this particular URI, right? So it will let you know that this user has been saved or persist in our database. Okay, that means you can confidently tell that, okay, my create operation is successful. See, when you do a create operation, right, maybe you are getting 201 response, right? So that means like 201 is like simple status code for the post, right? So response is successful means I received your request and it is successful, but it doesn't guarantee that it has been actually updated in the DB. So to confirm that it really happened, you have to do a get call now. Okay. So in the get, actually we don't send anything in the body. Mostly we send query parameters, right? Parameters in the URI itself. Like, okay, what is the unique identifier of this particular request? Now, suppose as a user, right, you may not know what is the unique ID, right? So you are not giving this unique ID, right? So this ID is just generated by the system, but your client application will be knowing, right? So as soon as you create a this thing post request, server may return a response like, okay, no, the user has been created. Now status in the body, it may say like status okay 200, and ID generated is like ID underscore 1 2 3 4. Now the client application can use this particular ID to make a get call. This is the post response to verify the content of that particular ID, because the client application knows, right, what information user has provided, and using this particular ID you can actually verify. Okay. So we have created, okay, and then we have verified. Now what next, right? Now suppose I want to update, right? We have done post and get. Now I want to update my information. So similarly, update also will be having a URI. Now to update a particular record, right? So you need the unique identifier again, right? ID 1 2 3 4, because you want to update only Manju's detail, right? So you don't want to update size or Dimple's detail, right? So you want to update this particular record. Now HTTP provides a update method or update verb, right? So we will use that, and in update contains a body as like post. Okay. So you have to give the details that you want to update. It's not necessarily like all the details you need to give. Suppose you want to update only phone number, you can give the phone number. I mean, it's all depends on the implementation. Now suppose you want to update the phone number to something else, and you update the location to maybe Delhi, right? And you send this particular request. So once you send this request to the server, now, okay, I didn't tell how the get no is linked to the server, right? So when you do a get, basically when you do a post, right, the SQL query will be create, right? So this is a basic SQL thing. So you have to create a record, and then when you do a get, it will be select query, right? Select SQL, and when you do a update, right? Update means you are doing actually update SQL. Okay, these are the SQL mapping for this CRUD operation. So server logic, right? So we will implement the logic for updating the record. So we will actually write a query, update this column. If the ID is this, then we'll update the phone number and address, basically, right? So once that is success, server should give you a response. Like post, response, you for update also, you should get a response like, okay, status is okay, and then ID is this, and then similarly after update, what is the validation, like, your record has been updated. So what you can do, you do a get, and this time when you do a get, you should see Delhi here. Okay, and you should see the updated phone number like 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8, right? So when you update it, you should get the updated record now, right? It has to be updated in the database. How you are doing in the database? Using update statement. Post means always it will create a new record. Put means it will update an existing record. We have created a record, we verified, then we updated a record, we verified. Now I want to delete that record, right? So I want to completely delete that record from database. So again here, so you have to use delete verb, okay, and then you have to pass the ID. Now delete, you don't need to pass the body. So you have to pass the unique ID of that particular record. And once server gets this, okay, so this is the SQL statement, and for delete, I'll use SQL delete statement to delete that record from the database table. Okay, once it is delete, now suppose you have deleted the record now, then and you are again calling this domain users ID 1234. This time you should get a message like, this particular ID does not exist. This users table you have, right? So users table have this phone number column, right? And now you don't, you have got a new requirement, like you don't need this phone number column, right? So what you have to do when you create, you have this table, go to that table and update the table. Okay, you deleted the table, but there is a trick here. Once you deleted the table, then somebody is actually sending a post request, right? For the same column name. Suppose phone number is not there and you are sending a post, right? It will throw an error because that mapping is there, right? Column to column mapping in your business logic. So you have to update your business logic as well, and you have to tell the consuming, API guys who created, who are consuming that, hey, I have deleted this phone, this thing. It is not available. Otherwise, if you send a request, you will get like, bad request kind of error because that column is missing now, right? Column is not there in your database, and you are sending the column from the UI means you are not aware that that column is not there. So you have to also inform the UI guys that, see, in the backend side we deleted the phone number, we do no longer need the phone number, so please remove that phone number field from the UI also, so that user don't send the phone number going forward for a post request. Okay, so user need to send only name and address. But from the front end side, it's up to you what information you are actually sending. Suppose that another use case can be, suppose name and address. Address is not mandatory. You can make some fields as mandatory, and you can make some field as optional. Okay, suppose you want phone number, but you don't want the address. That is like an optional parameter. Okay, so in the DB also you can add constraint, like, okay, if the request is not giving the phone number, you will throw an error. Like, this is a mandatory field, right? So when you fill a form in any application, if you are not filling mandatory fields, then you are getting error, right? So in this case, suppose phone number is a mandatory field, right? So and from the UI also, when you ask the user to fill the details, you have to notify the user, okay, it's okay, like if you don't fill the address, but phone number is mandatory. Without that, you cannot submit the request. You can put a constraint or check in the UI itself. Okay, and then when you get the request, for example, in this same case only, suppose user has sent a name, phone number, but user didn't send the address. Now you got the record, right? So when you update or when you add that record in your DB, so it will add the address as null basically, and then the phone number will be updated. These are the two scenarios that can happen in real life. Now we know, like, okay, how these CRUD operations are getting performed, how it is linked to the DB, right? Now head, I'm parking it right now. I will tell you in upcoming sessions like what and all head can do. Basically, it returns only status code and a header information. So yeah, when you say HTTP methods, right? So there is a concept called safe methods and unsafe methods. A safe method means client cannot change the state of the object or resource. For example, you are doing a GET, right? So client can only see it, the web application, right? So web client can see the details, but client cannot update the details in the DB using GET. Similarly, if you are sending a head operation, it will send only the status code and header information. So you cannot make any changes in the backend. So that's why get and head are considered as safe methods. Now post, put, and delete. So these three methods are considered as unsafe method because these three methods can actually manipulate the data in the backend. When you create a post, okay, you can create it. You can create maybe multiple times if there is no constraints added. Put also you can update it. Delete also you can delete it. So you should actually use or implement these methods very carefully. Suppose you are giving an option to delete a record to the user, so you should actually prompt, like, are you sure? Sometimes maybe as a user I just accidentally clicked on the delete button, so you should give a warning to them, like, are you sure you want to delete the record, or you want to deactivate the entire profile, right? So those kind of checks we need to test also in our testing when we do the testing. So it's important because those three methods are unsafe method. But if you see from the other side of the coin, right? So this is like from a HTTP itself, no, HTTP specification itself says these two are safe method and these three are unsafe method. But if you see from a hacker's point of view, right? So I could see, post is actually little safer than get. It's because, see, in the get you are exposing actually everything in the browser URL, right? So you, if suppose you are, exposing your user ID, specific to that particular user in your query parameters, right? So everything is exposed in the URL means, anyone can actually hack that URL, right? So from that point of view, yes, gate is actually not safe, but post and put, right? At least you are, taking care of the, safety. And when you send the details in the body, right? User, as an end user, I cannot see the details. But yeah, if you are using some proxies in the background, you can see the details, but otherwise you will not be able to see not details directly. So at least, from a hacking point of view, gate is a little bit dangerous than post input. When I do a multiple times, right, one request.
Yeah.
There's a concept called idempotent, right, in HTTP specification. And what does it say? Like, what will happen or what should happen if you send some request multiple times? Okay, so if you do get multiple times, right? So do you see any consequences? So yeah, that's why, like, we are saying we are not seeing any consequence when we do a get multiple times. What about put? I'll tell you why it will not affect. Suppose you have changed name to Manju 1, right? You have sent a request for put. From Manju to Manju 1, first time, it will change. Next, same request you are sending, Manju 1. There is
Yeah,
no,
then
now you already change it, right?
yeah.
So nothing will happen next time.
What about from Manju 1 to Manju 2 again?
Yeah, so this concept is like what will happen in the same request you are sending again and again, more than one,
Oh,
right?
okay, got it, got it.
Okay,
Yeah,
so first time, yeah, it will change to Manju 1. If again you are sending Manju 1, it will not do anything. So there won't be much impact.
yes, yes.
Same for delete. First time you deleted, next time if you are sending a delete request, it will tell record is not there.
Yeah.
So, we can actually, control that by adding logic. That's all, or constraint in your database. If you're not adding any constraint, so it will be keep on adding records, like duplicating the records.
Okay.
Okay. So next thing is HTTP status codes. What is a status code, right? So when you send a HTTP request, right, so server in the part of the response, right, server send a status code so that the client is notified about what happened, right? So whether, the request is success or request is, not reached the server, what happens? I mean, I want to know the status of my request, right? So basically these are the 5 key groups. Okay, so for status code, like if it is informational responses, so status code will be in between 100 and 199. If it is success, 200 to 299. Redirection means, 300 range. Client error means 400 range, and server error means 500 range. Now remember that it doesn't mean that we have error codes from 200 to 299, all error codes, right? So there are specific error codes, basically. It is not like, we have all the complete list of, errors there. There are specific error codes, specific status codes for no specific reason. Now how we will find out, right? So I have given a list here. This is the RFC for HTTP. So you can actually see, what is the meaning of each status code. For example, 2xx, right? This success. Now for maybe get, or it is returning 100, 200, right? So for post, it may return 201 to differentiate. But again, it is also dependent on the implementation, because your developers may use 200 only for post and get both. No, it's up to them, like what they have implemented and what status code they have implemented. But as a best practice, what we follow, like get we follow 200, post we follow 201. But yeah, if we're getting 200 for post, that is okay. But yeah, from an implementation side, they need to see that is accepted basically. Okay, so 400 series, it is like a client error, right? So for example, your field name or your column name is name, and you have done a spelling mistake like NAM, E is missing, right? So it will say like, okay, bad syntax, like bad request. So, and if the server is having problem, then it will say, yeah, server error, server is, bad gateway, internal server error, or not implemented, right? So all this list of code here, you can see in this. I will share this link to both of you. You can see the syntax, the error code and the reason, basically what it is. And yeah, you need to know at least all these error codes, like what it signifies basically, because in interviews mainly, some interviewers, they may ask so many, maybe 2 3 from each group, like they may ask, okay, what is the difference between 400 and 401, right? So just from an interview point of view, you need to understand also, like this complete list, like what does it do basically. Okay, but yeah, from a understanding point of view, you high level, you should know the range, what is the success range, what is the client error range, or what is the server range. You can remember 5, remembering 5 is easy. Anything in 400 range, you can know, okay, this is a client error response, or maybe 500 range, it is a server error response, or maybe success range, it is a it is successful.